hard climb to Fremont Pass. The summer sun in the Wyoming Territory was a cruel sort of heat, the kind that clung to the skin even as the wind scraped dust across the trail. Fremont Pass loomed ahead, a long, stubborn hill cut into gravel and stone. Willow McAllister leaned her whole weight into the wagon's yoke boots, slipping and catching with each lurch forward. Her hands ached from days of gripping the worn leather reins, though there was no animal to pull them taut anymore. The ox, her one remaining beast, had collapsed the day before, ribs jutting like driftwood against its hide. She had buried it herself at dawn, quiet and fast, with the same steady hands she used when stitching a tear or calming her children. The work had been heavy, but grief had no place here. There was still a hill to climb, 2 children to keep warm, and nothing between them and the empty road but her own resolve. Dust swirled up with each inch the wagon moved, clinging to her hair and eyelashes. She could feel the heat pressing down the grit between her teeth. Somewhere behind her in the shadowed wagon bed, Liam's small voice trembled. "Mama, I'm thirsty." She turned her head and forced a smile, masking the hollow dryness in her own throat. "We'll stop at the top, love. There's a creek just past it. I saw it on the map." Little Laurel was curled beside her brother, wrapped in a threadbare quilt that had seen more winters than it should have. Liam's thin arms circled her protectively, his face set with the kind of seriousness a boy shouldn't have to know at 8 years old. 6 months earlier, their father had walked away with a gambler's promise in his pocket and not so much as a glance back. Willow had waited 3 weeks for him to return, her hopes souring by the day until she'd packed what could be carried. Every mile since then had been a matter of willpower, no plan, no clear destination, just the stubborn need to keep moving. Now, every push against the wagon felt like lifting the whole weight of her life uphill. She braced her boots again, the wagon groaning in protest, and wondered, not for the first time, how much farther she could go. The stranger on the trail. It was the sound of hooves that made her pause. Not the frantic clatter of a rider in haste, but a measured, unhurried rhythm. She turned her head, heart kicking against her ribs, scanning the haze of dust until the shape of a man on horseback took form. He rode tall in the saddle hat brim pulled low over his brow, a rifle slung across his back. His horse, a rangy sorrel, showed the sweat of long travel, its chest darkened with effort. As he drew closer, his gaze took in the stalled wagon, the worn yoke, the 2 small figures in the back. His voice, when he spoke, was even firm, but without sharpness. "You planning to get that wagon up the pass by sundown?" Willow straightened, breath ragged from the climb. "I plan to keep moving whether it gets there or not." The man swung down from his horse in a single fluid motion. He had the rough, bearded look of someone who lived more years on the trail than in town. Shoulders marked by the wear of long days under sun and sky. His eyes scanned the setup, pausing on the empty harness and the single lead rope still tied off. "You lost your pull yesterday," he said, more observation than question. She nodded once. "Name's Rhett Jackson," he added, heading through the pass to Lander. She hesitated before giving hers. "Willow McAllister, that's Liam and Laurel." His eyes flicked to her children, then back to her. "You got any rope?" Her brow furrowed. "Some." Without another word, he began unfastening the harness from his horse. "I can get you up the hill." She opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off, still not looking at her. "You don't need to owe me." "I want to." Kindness from strangers had always been dangerous currency in her experience, yet something in the way he said it plain without a trace of flattery made her pause. Firelight and the first offer. By the time the wagon creaked over the top of Fremont Pass, the sun had dipped low, spilling gold into the cooler air. Willow's legs ached less from pulling and more from the strange relief of not having to. Rhett led them down a gradual slope to where a narrow creek spilled between cottonwoods. Without asking, he unhitched his horse, watered it, then gathered dry wood. The fire was lit before she could summon the words to thank him. She sat beside the flames, Laurel tucked into her arms, Liam resting his head against her shoulder. Rhett handed her a tin cup of water he'd boiled. "Where you headed in Lander?" he asked. "Nowhere yet. Just away from where we were." He nodded like he understood. "I know a family with a ranch. They take on boarders. Might be a good place to land." Her gaze lingered on him over the firelight. "Why are you doing this?" He poked at the embers with a stick, the sparks rising between them. "Because my ma raised me better than to ride past folks straining under a wagon with 2 kids in the back." It was such a simple answer, yet it landed somewhere deep. She found herself smiling just a little. That night he laid his bedroll between his horse and the wagon. She watched him as she settled in beside her children, the quiet settling over her like a quilt. For the first time in a long while, she felt something she didn't quite trust, yet safe. Stepping into the new valley. 5 days passed in a steady rhythm of wagon wheels and hoofbeats each mile, softening the wariness between them. Willow caught herself smiling more than once a day at Laurel's bright questions, at Liam's careful way of keeping pace with Rhett, and though she wouldn't say it aloud, at the way Rhett always found the most forgiving path for the wagon. By the 5th morning, when they crested a final ridge, the view spread out before them like a promise. Lander, valley green and open with the cottonwoods standing sentinel along a silver thread of river. The sight unraveled something tight in her chest. For the first time in months, the road ahead did not look hostile. They followed a fence line to a small ranch house, painted in sun-faded white, a red barn beside it like a steadying heartbeat. A woman stepped out onto the porch before they'd even slowed, a sturdy figure in a blue work dress, her gray-streaked hair pinned high. Her eyes landed on Rhett, and she broke into a smile that deepened every line on her face. "Well, look what the wind blew in." Rhett tipped his hat. "Miss Edna." "This is Willow McAllister and her children. They're looking for a place to land." Edna's gaze flicked over Willow. Worn boots, dust-streaked skirt, 2 children pressed close, and her expression softened into something kind. "We've got space in the side house. You can stay for a spell." Willow's instinct was to refuse outright, the old reflex of not taking what she couldn't repay. She looked at Rhett instead. "Why are you really doing this?" His eyes didn't flinch from hers. "Because I've been riding a long time, and I think I found where I want to stop if you'll have me." Her breath caught, though she said nothing. Instead, she took the offered step off the endless road and into the yard, her children trailing close behind. The ground here felt solid in a way she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Learning the shape of the days. The side house leaned a little to one side, and the screen door stuck in its frame. But the first night under its roof, Willow slept without starting awake at every sound. In the morning, Laurel discovered a pair of wooden spoons in a drawer and clacked them together like cymbals. Liam found a tattered almanac behind the stove and read passages aloud, while his sister braided clover stems into her hair. It was more life than Willow had seen in them for months. Edna let them settle without fuss, offering Oates a slab of salt pork and instructions for the hand pump when the well ran slow. Rhett didn't linger that first evening, though his presence was everywhere. He fixed the squeaky sash on the window without being asked, tightened the back step where the wood had gone soft. He moved through the work like a man used to leaving things better than he found them. Willow, unused to kindness without a hook in it, watched him from the doorway. She had promised herself she wouldn't let anyone carry her burdens for her, but this felt different, less like someone taking over, more like someone adding his strength to hers. She rose early each day, determined to earn their place. She patched feed sacks Edna handed her, sewed with slow, careful stitches on the porch steps, while Liam and Laurel played in the yard. The rhythm of the ranch was new but steady, morning chores, midday sun pressing down evenings cooled by the breeze off the cottonwoods. Somewhere in those first days, the tight knot in her chest began to loosen, though she kept that knowledge to herself. Quiet words and gentle comparisons. One morning she found Rhett in the corral, cinching a saddle strap. "Does Edna expect me to work?" she asked, holding the pail of milk she'd drawn before sunrise. He glanced up, one brow raised. "Only if you want to. She doesn't keep ledgers, just notices who pulls their weight." Willow's chin lifted slightly. "I'm not afraid of work. I just want to earn our place." Rhett gave a slow nod. "Then she'll see." She meant to turn back toward the side house, but his horse sidestepped and he steadied it with a low murmur. The sound in his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it, like he believed the animal was listening. "You break horses for a living?" she asked. He shrugged. "Sometimes. But they don't all need breaking. Some just need someone to listen long enough to see what they already know how to do." Willow shifted the pail in her hands. "And people." He stepped back from the saddle, meeting her gaze without hesitation. "Same rules apply." That afternoon, Edna handed her a stack of torn feed sacks and a spool of thread. "Patch what you can. When the rains come, even a frayed seam will let half the world in." Willow set to work on the porch, her needle finding its rhythm. Rhett passed by with a coil of fence wire, pausing to watch her stitches. "My ma used to say a good seam is like a good fence, keeps things where they belong." Willow didn't look up. And what if something doesn't belong anywhere anymore? Rhett rested the coil against the post. "Then maybe it's not the fence that's wrong. Maybe it's time to build new ground under it." She let the words settle in, feeling the weight of them long after he'd walked on. The rhythm of an unfinished family. By the second week, Willow found herself moving in step with the quiet pulse of the ranch. She rose before dawn, packing biscuits into a cloth for Liam to carry to the barn, then teaching Laurel how to sweep ashes from the stove without stirring dust into the air. Her hands were never idle, mending curtains, shelling beans, pulling weeds along the garden rows, until her fingers took on the tough feel of soil. She noticed things she hadn't before, the way the light spilled over the cottonwoods in the early morning, the smell of coffee drifting from Edna's kitchen, the steady clip of Rhett's boots crossing the yard each evening. Rhett often returned late, the collar of his shirt streaked with dust, but his shoulders carried a looser set than when they'd first met. He never asked for supper, though a plate always ended up in front of him. He didn't fill the air with chatter, but when he spoke, his words landed with weight. To Liam, he asked, "What do you want to be when you're tall enough to see over the fence without jumping?" To Laurel, What do you dream about when the night's quiet? And once to Willow as they shelled peas on the porch, what do you miss most from before? She'd answered without thinking. My mother's hands. They always smelled like lavender, even in winter. He'd nodded as if he could see them too. One evening, after the children were tucked beneath their quilt, Willow stepped outside. Rhett was sitting on the grass near the well boots, off elbows resting on his knees, his eyes turned toward the stars. She joined him without asking the rustle of her skirt, the only announcement. You ever think about what comes next? He asked. I think about tomorrow, she said, and the day after if the roof still holds. His gaze stayed on the sky. I think about staying. There was no question in his voice, no plea, just truth. He turned his palm up beside him, not as an invitation, but as space offered. She set her hand in his, and in the quiet that followed the space between them filled with something steady. The invitation to start again. The late August sun hung low over Lander Valley, heavy and gold, when Willow stood knee-deep in the creek scrubbing Liam's shirt against a flat stone. Laurel sat on the bank, threading reeds into loops, her small brow furrowed in concentration. Edna had gone to town, Rhett off fencing the south field with 2 hands from the neighboring ranch. The air smelled of water and cottonwood bark. Willow wrung the shirt, laid it flat on a sun-warmed boulder, then dipped her hands into the cool current, rinsing away soap and dust. Near dusk, Rhett returned, sweat darkening the sleeves of his shirt, a strip of rawhide tied around his palm. Liam ran to him, eager to show a raccoon track near the coop. Rhett crouched to listen, nodding as if the boy were teaching him something new. After supper, as Willow stacked tin plates, Rhett leaned against the doorframe. You ever miss the quiet? She glanced over her shoulder. I don't think it ever left. It just changed shape. He stepped inside and laid a folded slip of paper on the table. Edna gave me this. There's a claim opening along the North Fork. Not much yet brush water, good soil. I could build something there. Willow's hands stilled. You asking me to start from scratch again? Rhett's eyes were steady. I'm saying you wouldn't have to do it alone. She searched his face, looking for any trace of pity or obligation, and found neither. And what would I owe you for that? He stepped closer, his voice quiet. Only what you already give. She didn't answer right away, and he didn't push. That night, after the children had settled in the lean-to they'd made in the yard, she sat beside him on a wool blanket near the fire pit. They talked of losses his brother to fever his mother before the war, and of the people who never stayed. Turns out the right ones do, he said. She reached for his hand. Then let's plant it deep. Deciding to put down roots. The next morning, Rhett took Liam beyond the creek, showing him how to read the slope of the land for runoff, while Willow stayed behind to help Edna press apples for cider. Laurel played in the dust with a neighbor's hound, pup laughter ringing clear free of the brittle edge it once carried. By supper, Rhett and Liam returned with trout strung on a willow branch, Liam flushed with pride. While Rhett cleaned the fish at the pump, Willow ladled stew into bowls. Liam said you taught him to track the current, she remarked. Rhett smiled faintly. He's got a good eye. Noticed a shift in the riverbed before I did. Later, when the moon had risen, Willow lit the porch lamp. Rhett joined her, carrying 2 carved wooden cups filled with cider. She sipped, setting hers down with care. You ever get tired of moving? His eyes lingered on the lamplight spilling across the yard. I used to think I'd never stop. But I wasn't looking for a place. I was trying to outrun something. She didn't ask what. I'm not running anymore, he said. What changed? His gaze shifted to her. You did. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I want to build this with you, but slow. I've had promises given too quick before. Rhett turned his hand to fit hers in his palm. I'm not in a hurry. Just here. And in the space between those words, Willow felt the ground under her steady as if it had been waiting for her all along, trusting the land and each other. By early September, the nights carried a cool breath down from the mountains. Willow stood on the porch of the side house at Sunrise Shoal, pulled close, watching Rhett pace between two cedar posts he'd set the day before. He moved with a craftsman's eye, measuring each step, imagining the shape of a fence that didn't yet exist. It wasn't just lumber and nails he was weighing, it was permanence. She stepped down into the grass boots, whispering against the dew. You think this land will hold through the winter? She asked. Rhett straightened the morning light, catching in his eyes. If we brace it right, it'll hold. He paused, then lowered the hammer in his hand. You mean us? She gave a small nod. It's not the storms that worry me, he said. It's whether we build enough between now and then to weather them. Willow let her fingers trail along the rough grain of the nearest post. I spent years thinking I had to do everything myself. Even now I wake expecting to carry it all again. Rhett's voice was steady. You won't be. Not here. Not with me. They held each other's gaze until the sound of Laurel's laughter rang across the yard. The child was playing with the neighbor's pup, her skirts puffing as she spun in the dust, no hint of fear in her voice. That afternoon, Rhett took Liam beyond the creek, teaching him how to judge the lay of the land for water. Willow stayed behind with Edna, pressing apples for cider, the sharp, sweet scent filling the kitchen. By supper, Rhett and Liam returned with fresh-caught trout, the boy's face alight with accomplishment. Rhett cleaned the fish at the pump, while Willow ladled stew into bowls, feeling a quiet satisfaction that this somehow had begun to feel like home. The truth about stopping. Later that night, the children asleep, Willow lit the porch lamp and sat at the small table. Rhett joined her without needing an invitation, carrying 2 carved cups filled with cider. You ever get tired of moving? She asked. He leaned back, eyes drawn to the lamplight spilling against the dark. I used to think I'd never stop. But I wasn't looking for a place. I was trying to outrun something. His voice carried a weight she didn't press him to name. I'm not running anymore. She studied him. What changed? He looked toward the window where the soft glow of lamplight blurred the outline of her home. You did. The answer was so simple, so sure that it settled between them without a ripple. She reached across the table, her fingertips brushing his. I want to build this with you, but slow. I've had promises given too quick before. Rhett turned his hand, letting hers rest fully in his palm. I'm not in a hurry. Just here. The next morning, Rhett walked to town with a neighbor. Willow spent the day piecing together a quilt from worn dresses and flour sacks, teaching Laurel to stitch along the edge. In the yard, Liam dipped apples into boiled molasses, his hands sticky and grinning. When Rhett returned, he didn't announce anything. He simply stepped into the yard, dust on his coat, and handed Willow a folded slip of paper. She opened it. Her name was on the land claim written in his careful, blocky hand. Told them we'd build it together, he said. Her throat tightened, and when she looked up, he was still watching her, waiting for the answer she didn't need to speak aloud. Beginning. Under the same roof, the first beams of the new house rose in the last warm days of September. Liam hauled tools and fetched nails, proud of the calluses forming on his palms. Laurel spent her afternoons with Edna, learning to dry herbs and card wool, her small fingers nimble over each task. Willow carried water to the work site, the sound of hammers and saws mingling with the rustle of cottonwood leaves. She brought Rhett a strip of jerky wrapped in cloth one afternoon, finding him balanced along a roof beam. "You always this steady up high?" she called. He crouched, taking the jerky. "Only when I know who's standing below." She leaned against a post, smiling faintly. "You trust easy." His reply was quiet. "I don't, but I trust you." As the frame took shape, Rhett ordered a cast-iron stove without telling her. When it arrived, she crossed her arms. "You didn't ask first." He met her gaze evenly. "You'd have said it was too much. I don't like watching you warm your hands on a fire pit when you could have a hearth." She shook her head but didn't press. That evening she found an old oil lamp in Edna's shed, cleaned the chimney glass, and hung it from the eaves of the new house. The glow cast a soft halo over the dirt floor. Rhett joined her with a blanket, spreading it on the ground where the kitchen would be. "I've never built something that stayed," he said. "You have, now," she answered. When he reached into his coat, it was to pull out a small canvas pouch. Inside was a brass ring with a single carnelian stone. "Not fancy," he said, "but it's honest. Like us." She slid it onto her finger. "It fits." They agreed on a wedding without ribbons or lace, just a Sunday morning under the cottonwoods, Edna speaking the words, the children holding wildflowers and feathers. And when it was done, Willow felt something settle deep inside, like a gate closing against the wind. That night they moved into the half-finished house, the hearth's first fire throwing a warm light against the walls that would soon be their own. The first winter. Together. Winter came early that year, dusting the valley with snow before the last yellow cottonwood leaves had finished falling. The half-finished house held firm against the wind, its roof braced well and its walls lined with whatever cloth and paper Willow could find to block the drafts. Inside the hearth glowed steady the cast-iron stove, clicking softly as it held heat through the night. Willow taught Laurel to knit by the stove, her small fingers tangling the yarn before learning the rhythm of loop and pull. Liam read aloud from the almanac he had once found behind Edna's stove, his voice gaining confidence with each evening. Rhett spent the coldest days repairing tools, carving wooden handles for the ones too worn to last another season. Above the hearth he fixed a rack for drying meat, each piece salted and hung neatly in a row. One evening he placed a smooth comb of juniper wood into Willow's hands. She turned it over, feeling the polish of its grain, the subtle scent of the tree lingering. "Made it for you," he said simply, as if it were nothing at all, though she knew the hours such a thing took. There was a quiet between them now that wasn't the silence of strangers or the guarded stillness of survival. It was a full, warm hush, the kind that comes when words are no longer needed to explain presence. Rhett would rest a hand lightly on her back as he passed, and she would lean into him without thinking. The children laughed more freely, the sound bright, even in the short winter days. Willow found herself counting not the miles they'd traveled, but the days they'd been here, and how each one seemed to settle her roots a little deeper. the spring of new life. When spring broke, the land softened and the air filled with the scent of thawed earth and cottonwood sap. Rhett turned the soil for a kitchen garden, his shoulders moving in a rhythm Willow had come to know as the shape of his work. Liam dug post holes along the property's edge, proud of the blisters forming on his hands. Laurel darted through the grass, chasing the first butterflies of the season, her laughter ringing clear across the yard. Rhett built a small coop for hens, its slanted roof shingled with leftover boards from the house. Willow planted herbs in a row along the back porch, their green shoots pushing through the soil like small declarations of survival. In the mornings, she and Rhett would walk the rows together, planning what to plant, where peas here, beans along the far edge, carrots in the damp strip by the pump. It was work that promised more than a day's return, and Willow found comfort in that. One bright morning in mid-May, she stepped into the sunlight with her hand low on her belly. Rhett was by the corral mending a gate, but when he saw her, he set his tools aside and crossed the yard. "You sure?" he asked, searching her face. She nodded. "I know the signs." His smile was slow but certain. He wrapped his arms around her, his voice warm against her hair. "We'll make room." And she knew they would, not just in the house, but in the life they'd built, in the way their days now bent toward each other. Clara, and the forever they built. Late the following winter, under a sky heavy with snow, their daughter was born. She came with a full head of dark hair and a cry that filled the small house. They named her Clara for the clarity of the morning light that spilled through the cottonwoods, for the stillness that had finally found them. Willow held her close in those first days, the warmth of the hearth at her back, Rhett's steady presence at her side. The seasons turned around them, each one leaving its mark on the house and the people within it. The cottonwoods grew taller, their roots sinking deeper beside the creek. Liam grew sure-footed, his gaze sharp like Rhett's. Laurel's hair caught the sun as she worked in the garden, her braids neat and proud. Clara learned to take her first steps on the packed earth floor, her small hands reaching for both her parents at once. Most evenings, when the work was done and the children's voices had softened into the hum of bedtime, Willow and Rhett would sit on the porch, hands twined. They watched the smoke curl from the chimney, the sky shift from gold to indigo. There were no more endless roads to walk, no more wagons to pull alone, no more wondering where love might be lost. Here under the cottonwoods and beside the steady creek, they had found not just a home, but the place where their lives and their hearts would remain. Always Wyoming Territory. Summer of 1877. Dust rose in steady clouds up the trail to Fremont Pass, the kind of fine grit that clung to skin and stung the eyes. Willow McAllister leaned her whole weight into the wagon's yoke boots, slipping on loose gravel, the leather reins limp in her hands. There was no animal to pull them taut anymore. The ox, her last, had collapsed the morning before, its ribs showing sharp as driftwood against hide. She'd buried it herself, quick and quiet, because there was still a hill to climb, 2 children to keep warm, and no one in the world left but them. "Willow, I'm thirsty." Liam's voice came from behind her, small and tight. She turned, forcing a smile past the dryness in her own mouth. "We'll stop at the top, love. There's a creek just past it. I saw it on the map." Little Laurel sat beside her brother in the wagon bed, wrapped in a threadbare quilt. Liam's arms circled her, trying to be the man their father had never been, not because he'd died, but because he'd walked away 6 months earlier with a gambler's promise and hadn't looked back. Willow had waited 3 weeks, hope souring with each day, then packed what she could and left. Every mile since had been a matter of will, not destination. The wagon groaned forward another inch before she heard it, the steady, unhurried rhythm of hooves. She turned, squinting through the dust. A man rode tall in the saddle hat, low over his brow, rifle slung across his back. His horse was a rangy sorrel, chest dark with sweat. He slowed as he reached them, eyes scanning the wagon, the empty harness, the 2 small faces in the back. "You planning to get that wagon up the pass by sundown?" His voice was even not unkind. "I plan to keep moving whether it gets there or not," she answered, breath still ragged. He swung down from the saddle, rough-bearded, sun-worn, with the look of someone who'd spent more years on the trail than in any one town. His gaze landed on the slack harness. "Lost your pull yesterday," she nodded. "Name's Rhett Jackson, heading through to Lander." She hesitated before answering Willow McAllister. "That's Liam and Laurel." "You got any rope?" he asked. "Some." Without waiting for more, he began unfastening his horse's harness. "I can get you up the hill." She bristled. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, not looking at her. "But I want to." She didn't trust kindness, not anymore. But something about the way he spoke plain without the shine of false promises made her nod. By sundown, they were on the crest, the air cooler, and the light turning gold. Rhett led them to the creek she had promised the children, watered his horse, then gathered wood. He built a fire without asking. Willow sat close, Laurel in her arms, Liam's head on her shoulder. Rhett handed her a tin cup of boiled water. "Where are you headed, in land of nowhere yet?" "Just away from where we were." He nodded, poking at the fire. "I know a family with a ranch. They take on boarders." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. His eyes stayed on the flames. "Because my ma raised me better than to ride past folks straining under a wagon with 2 kids in the back." The answer was so simple, it left her quiet. That night, he slept between his horse and the wagon. She watched him as she settled with her children, and for the first time in months felt the edges of safety press in. 5 days later, they crested another ridge, and the Lander Valley spread before them. Grassland, soft with green, a silver river, winding under cottonwoods. Willow felt something in her chest unclench. They followed a fence line to a white ranch house and red barn. A sturdy woman stepped out smiling when she saw Rhett. "Well, look what the wind blew in," Miss Edna Rhett said, tipping his hat. "This is Willow McAllister and her children. They're looking for a place to land." Edna's gaze softened. "We've got space in the side house." Later, Willow caught Rhett's eye. "Why are you really doing this?" "Because I've been riding a long time, and I think I found where I want to stop if you'll have me." She said nothing, but followed Edna toward the side house. The small building leaned a little, the screen door sticking in its frame, but under its roof, Willow slept without waking to every noise. Laurel found wooden spoons in a drawer, banging them together. Liam discovered a moth-eaten almanac and read aloud, his voice filling the space. Rhett fixed a squeaky window, patched a step, moving with the quiet efficiency of a man who left things better than he found them. One morning she found him cinching a saddle strap. "Does Edna expect me to work?" she asked. "Only if you want to. She just notices who pulls their weight." I'm not afraid of work, Willow said. I just want to earn our place. Then she'll know, Rhett answered. His horse sidestepped. He steadied it with a low murmur. You break horses sometimes. They don't all need breaking, just someone to see what they already know how to do. She tilted her head. And people, same rules apply. Edna gave her feed sacks to mend. As Willow stitched on the porch, Rhett passed with a coil of fence wire. My ma used to say a good seam's like a good fence, keeps things where they belong. And if something doesn't belong anywhere, then maybe it's time to build new ground under it. Days settled into a rhythm. Willow rose early, packed food for Liam to carry to the barn, taught Laurel to sweep ashes from the stove. Rhett came home dust-streaked, never asking for supper, but always ending with a plate. He asked Liam what he wanted to be when he grew tall enough to see over the fence without jumping. He asked Laurel what she dreamed about in the dark. And once to Willow, "What do you miss most from before my mother's hands?" she said. "Always smelled like lavender even in winter." He nodded like he could see them too. One evening she stepped outside to find him sitting near the well, boots off, looking at the stars. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. "I think about tomorrow, and the day after if the roof still holds." He nodded. "I think about staying." He turned his palm up beside him. She set her hand in his, and the quiet between them became something full. By late August, Willow was at the creek washing Liam's shirt on a flat stone while Laurel wove reeds on the bank. Rhett returned at dusk, sleeves dark with sweat. After supper, he leaned in the doorway. "You ever miss the quiet? I don't think it ever left. It just changed shape." He laid a folded paper on the table. "There's a claim opening on the North Fork. I could build something there if someone wanted to make it a home." She studied him. "You asking me to start from scratch again? I'm saying you wouldn't have to do it alone." That night under the stars, they spoke of the ones they'd lost. "Turns out the right ones do stay," he said. She reached for his hand. "Then let's plant it deep." Rhett taught Liam to read the land. Willow pressed apples with Edna. Laurel's laughter lost its edge. Rhett cleaned trout at the pump while Willow dished stew. That night on the porch, she asked, "You ever get tired of moving? I wasn't looking for a place before I was running from something. I'm not running anymore." "What changed you?" She told him she wanted to build slow. "I'm not in a hurry," he said. The next evening he returned from town with a folded slip of paper, her name on the claim. Told them we'd build it together. The frame of the new house rose before the first frost. Liam hauled tools, Laurel learned herbs from Edna. Rhett ordered a stove without asking. Willow found an old oil lamp and hung it from the eaves, its glow pooling on the dirt floor. "I've never built something that stayed," he told her. "You have now," she said. He gave her a brass ring with a carnelian stone. Not fancy, but honest. They married under the cottonwoods, Edna speaking the words, the children holding flowers. Snow came early. Inside the stove burned warm. Willow taught Laurel to knit, listened to Liam's reading. Rhett carved her a juniper comb, the scent lingering in her hair. The quiet between them was the kind that filled rather than emptied. When spring came, they planted the garden, built a hen coop, dug post holes. One May morning, Willow stepped into the sun with her hand on her belly. Rhett crossed to her. "You sure?" She nodded. "We'll make room," he said. Late the next winter, their daughter was born, a dark-haired girl they named Clara, for the clarity of the dawn and the stillness of the creek. Seasons turned the cottonwoods growing taller. Roots deep. Liam's step grew sure, Laurel's laughter rang. Bright, Clara took her first steps on the packed floor, and most evenings Willow and Rhett sat on the porch hands, twined, watching smoke curl from the chimney. No more endless roads. No more wagons to pull alone. They had found their place together, always.